Hello there, and good afternoon to my family and friends and the public. In this video, I'm going to be reading aloud an article I found on the New York Times that is about the opposition journalist that has been arrested in Belarus. As I read through the article, I'm going to be commenting on what I believe and in regards to it. And in the end, after reading all of the article and after commenting everything that I want to comment, I'm going to be providing the web address of the website so that you at home or abroad can read through it. So now, let me begin. Belarus forces down plane to seize dissident. Europe sees state hijacking. The dissident Roman Protasevich co-founded a Telegram channel that is a popular opposition outlet in Belarus. The plane was flying from Athens to Lithuania when it was forced down. This article is written by Anton Troyanovsky and Ivan Nechepurenko. Published May 23, 2021, and it has been updated today, May 24, 2021, 8:40 a.m. Eastern Time. Now I read the article. Moscow, and I comment from time to time. The strongman president of Belarus sent a fighter jet to intercept a European airliner traveling through the country's airspace on Sunday and ordered the plane to land in the capital, Minsk, where a prominent opposition journalist aboard was then seized, provoking international outrage. The stunning gambit by Alexander G. Lukashenko, a brutal and erratic leader who has clung to power despite huge protests against his government last year, was condemned by European officials who compared it to hijacking. It underscored that, with the support of President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia, Mr. Lukashenko is prepared. Let me read that part again. It underscored that, with the support of President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia, Mr. Lukashenko is prepared to go to extraordinary lengths to repress dissent. Now, what I will say is this. So there's this opposition journalist. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and search it online. And he was on a flight that was destined to arrive at Lithuania, which is part of Europe, and that flight was redirected to a different location, Minsk, and that is where he was arrested. And well, because of his status, political status, this created international outrage. The RyanAir flight from Athens to Vilnius, yes, I am continuing reading, Lithuania, carrying some 170 passengers, among them the journalist Roman Protasevich, which is the opposition journalist that was arrested, was flying over Belarus when Belarusian air traffic controllers notified its pilots of a potential security threat on board and directed the plane to divert to Minsk, the Ireland-based airline said in a statement. Mr. Lukashenko, often referred to as Europe's last dictator, personally ordered a MiG-29 fighter jet to escort the RyanAir plane to the Minsk airport after a bomb threat, his press service said. According to the statement, Mr. Lukashenko gave an unequivocal order to make the plane do a U-turn and land. So, who is Mr. Lukashenko? He is the let's see here. So there you have it, Europe's last dictator. And he was the one who personally ordered a fighter jet so that it can escort the plane, the airline, the plane that was in the air and that held the opposition journalist Roman Protasevich. The reason that it was diverted was actually at first because of a bomb threat that was reported to the air traffic controllers. Actually, I'm sorry, to the pilots of the airplane. Now I continue reading. After about 7 hours on the ground, the RyanAir Boeing 737-800 took off for Vilnius from Minsk with its passengers and crew and landed safely at its final destination 35 minutes later. So that is the time frame that all of this lasted, with arresting, with letting the plane land in a different destination and arresting the journalist, the opposition journalist, and the rest of the events that happened. But not Mr. Protasevich. During the plane stop in Minsk, he was arrested, the country's interior ministry said in a statement that was later deleted from its official Telegram channel. Telegram being a social media channel for social media activities and communication for opposition leaders. After the plane was diverted to Minsk, Mr. Protasevich, 26, turned to fellow passengers and said he was facing the death penalty. One passenger, Monica Simkine, told Agence France Presse in Vilnius. He was not screaming, but it was clear that he was very much afraid, another passenger, Edvina Stimsa, recalled, according to AFP. It looked like if the window had been open, he would have jumped out of it. So this means that he was apprehensive, he was scared, he was tense, and he just didn't want to be there at the moment. Roman Protasevich did not want to be there at the moment. He was afraid that he was going to get arrested, which is exactly what happened. I continue reading now. No bomb was found on board, the country's law enforcement authority said. The investigative committee, Belarus's top investigative agency, said it had opened a criminal case into a false bomb threat. Nothing untoward was found, said the statement by RyanAir, a popular low-cost airline. The International Civil Aviation Organization, an agency of the United Nations, said it was strongly concerned about the incident. The agency said that the apparent forced landing of the flight may have violated the Chicago Convention, the 1944 accord that established the core principles of international aviation. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know much about what the Chicago Convention is and what its details are. Perhaps that is something that can be looked up at a later time. Well, for me anyways. But that is a strong statement coming from the International Civil Aviation Organization. At least that's what I think. Anyways, reading on forth. The government of Lithuania issued its own statement saying, "It is an unprecedented attack against the international community. A civilian plane and its passengers have been hijacked by military force." Mr. Protasevich is a co-founder and a former editor of the NEXTA Nexta Telegram channel, one of the most popular opposition outlets in Belarus. Most independent media organizations in the country were forced to shut down after large-scale protests erupted over a disputed presidential election in 2020. The social network Telegram was left as one of the only means of uncensored communication. So there you have it. That is this next the Telegram channel. and most independent media organizations, they were all forced to shut down back in last year, 2020, due to a uh, very tumultuous, to say the to say it in a certain manner, a tumultuous presidential election. Now I continue reading. Over the past few years, Mr. Protasevich has been living in Lithuania in exile, fearing imprisonment in Belarus, his home country, where he is accused of inciting hatred and mass disorder and faces more than 12 years in prison if convicted. In November, the country's main security service, still called the KGB, put him on a list of terrorists. So this means that despite his activities as an opposition journalist, he has been living in Lithuania in exile, and he has been scared of being imprisoned, of being arrested and thereafter imprisoned in Belarus, his home country, and there is a possibility that he could face more than 12 years in prison because of all of the hatred and mass disorder that occurred back in the day. Because of all of that, the mass hatred and the mass disorder and the protesting, the country's main security service, called the KGB, put him on a list of designated terrorists. Now I continue reading. On Sunday, Mr. Protasevich was flying back from Greece after attending an economic conference there with the Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Greek officials said. At the Athens airport, Mr. Protasevich had noticed a bald man following him and taking photographs, according to messages he sent that were published by a Telegram channel he edits. After his arrest, colleagues said they had immediately revoked Mr. Protasevich's access to the Telegram channel to make sure that data, however you may want to put that, about its 256,000 subscribers could not fall into the hands of Belarusian law enforcement officials. So, Mr. Roman Protasevich, as he was in the airport, noticed somebody taking pictures and following him, and these observations were sent as messages, and they were published on the channel known as social media channel known as Telegram, which he edits. So after he was arrested, not at the Athens airport, but at the airport in Minsk, he was revoked access. Mr. Roman Protasevich had his access revoked using the Telegram social media channel to make sure that different pieces and bits of data about its 256,000 subscribers could not fall into the wrong hands in terms of the Belarusian law enforcement officials. Now I continue reading. Many of Mr. Lukashenko's political opponents have sought safe haven and exile in Lithuania and Poland, but Sunday's events show that his government can reach them even in the air. That's indeed right. Yep. Both Lithuania and Greece are members of the European Union. Belarus is not. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, the EU's executive body, called the plane's diversion utterly unacceptable. The Greek Foreign Ministry called it a state hijacking. That is what it is commonly called, even by the news outlets. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki of Poland called it an act of state terrorism. Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said that such an act cannot remain without clear consequences. His French counterpart Jean-Yves Le Drian called for a firm and unified response by the EU. So all of these different statements are rather beliefs of what these people believe, the people from the Greek Foreign Ministry and the French counterparts of that, and they are each stating that this incident is pretty much a state hijacking, it is state-sponsored terrorism, and it is unacceptable. But then there are others who would say that no, it is not state-sponsored terrorism, it is not a state hijacking. In fact, others would say that Mr. Lukashenko is pretty much doing what has to be done after letting a fighter jet go up into the air and escorting the flight in which Mr. Roman Protasevich was in. And well, yeah, that's pretty much that. So these are all statements, all opinions of what they believe has happened. But this is more from a matter that perhaps is more easier said, and the other one in which the support of it, in which the acceptance of Mr. Lukashenko's actions, that would mean that there's two sides to this that has happened. Now, moving on forward, I continue reading. The American Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken said, "We strongly condemn the Lukashenko regime's brazen and shocking act to divert a commercial flight and arrest a journalist. Perhaps because of the Chicago Convention and other bylaws or whatnot, and other policies. We demand an international investigation and are coordinating with our partners on next steps." That is what he believes. Antony J. Blinken, the current Secretary of State of the Biden administration. But even as European officials threatened consequences for Belarus, it was not immediately clear what those might be. The bloc already imposed sanctions last year against leading Minsk officials, including Mr. Lukashenko himself, for violent repression and intimidation of peaceful demonstrators, opposition members, and journalists. So this is a description of the sanctions that were imposed last year because of the presidential election of 2020, not the American one, don't get confused now, and the protests and the violent repression and the violent demonstrations that were caused by Mr. Roman Protasevich, or that involved Mr. Roman Protasevich and other demonstrators, opposition journalists, and simply opposition members. On Sunday, Lithuania's President Gitanas Nausėda, describing Belarus's actions, as abhorrent, calls for its airspace to be declared unsafe and for Belarusian aircraft not to be accepted at EU airports. So yesterday, this is pretty much a statement by the President of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda, and pretty much says that the airspace in Belarus is now unsafe because of what happened and because of the presence of the fighter jet that was pretty much executed by Lukashenko. So yeah. In Russia, where the state media described last year's uprising against Mr. Lukashenko as a Western plot, The arrest met with approval among Mr. Putin's supporters. Now here come the statements and the opinions and the fact-making from other people. Those who support Mr. Putin saw this incident, this event, as something that is favorable. Margarita Simonian, editor of the pro-Kremlin RT television network, wrote on Twitter that Mr. Lukashenko played it beautifully, and Vyacheslav Lysakov, a member of parliament allied with Mr. Putin, described Mr. Protasevich's arrest as a brilliant special operation. So there you go. That almost sounds like a praising of the decision that Mr. Lukashenko took with the whole military jet and all, and diversion of the plane where Mr. Protasevich was in. The Belarusian authorities said they had ordered the plane to land after receiving information about a bomb threat, though Vilnius, the plane's destination, was much closer than Minsk when the jetliner turned around, flight tracking data showed. The country's defense ministry said in another statement that the country's air defense forces were put on high alert. Mr. Lukashenko and his government are known to use ruses to pursue their political opponents. So that's a straightforward statement. That's simply that this Lukashenko guy is known for using these tricks, these techniques to pursue and to capture his political opponents. Mr. Protasevich's arrest comes months after the biggest wave of street protests in the history of Belarus failed to depose Mr. Lukashenko. Wait, let me read that again. Mr. Protasevich's arrest comes months after the biggest wave of street protests in the history of Belarus failed to depose Mr. Lukashenko, who has been the country's authoritarian leader for more than 26 years. So now if you've been wondering, well, who is Mr. Lukashenko? There you have it. He is the authoritarian leader of Belarus, which is the location where Mr. Roman Protasevich, the opposition journalist that is central to all of this story that has been published by the New York Times. Okay. That is the location where he was arrested. More than 32,000 protesters were arrested and at least 4 died during the protests. Hundreds were brutally beaten by the police. NEXTA Nexta emerged as the leading online outlet coordinating the demonstrations. So this is just a reminder of what had happened in the year 2020 with the protest and the brutally beating up and all of that, and the violent demonstrations that occurred, and those that were arrested versus those that died because of it. Backed by Mr. Putin and using extraordinary violence, Mr. Lukashenko managed to successfully crack down on protesters, with the country's security apparatus remaining loyal to him. Now, Ms. Tikhanovskaya, Mr. Lukashenko's main opponent during the last presidential election in August, which was widely regarded as rigged, called the episode with the RyanAir flight an operation by the special services to hijack an aircraft in order to detain activist and blogger Roman Protasevich. Not a single person who flies for Belarus can be sure of his safety, she said. I continue reading on forth. Airline industry observers predicted a strong response from commercial airlines. The thing that is unprecedented about this incident is that it was state-sponsored, said Kevin Murphy, an analyst at Morgan Stanley. The reminder that even people hurtling through the air in passenger jets miles above ground can be affected by the tumultuous geopolitics of Eastern Europe evoked the crash of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, which was shot down by Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine in 2014. The apparently accidental attack killed all 298 passengers and crew and prompted airlines to avoid flying over eastern Ukraine. So that is a bit of a reminder a bit of a memory of what happened with that. What happened in the past with that. On Sunday, after the RyanAir flight finally made it to its destination, the airline issued a statement. We apologize sincerely to all affected passengers for this regrettable delay, which was outside RyanAir's control, it said. So, that is the article. Once again, the article is called Belarus Forces Down Plane to Seize Dissident. Europe Sees State Hijacking. And that is the article. It was published by the New York Times yesterday, updated today, May 24th, 2021, and now I will provide you at home or abroad, or those that are on the go, the web address. It is https www.nytimes.com 2021 05 23 World Europe RyanAir-Belarus.html. I will repeat it again, and this time I'll include the different figures. https://www.nytimes.com/2021/05/23/Ryanair-Belarus.html. That is the web address to locate the website. You can read this article all on your own, and for that matter, maybe even you at home, or you who are my friends, you who are my family, can make your own video about this article. But this is what is currently happening on the news, and so just like that, I decided to make a video on it. So that's the video. So thank you so much for watching, and may you each at home, on the go or abroad, may whoever you are, have a fantastic day today. Goodbye.